Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. And if you're new here, this is something we do every single week, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about over the past week. I don't really have too much to go over other than I did miss a campaign last week. Except I didn't really miss it because I did mention it would be launching soon. I just didn't know it was going to be within that same week. And this was for the Fox experiment. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a game where you're going to be drawing different foxes from a pool, drafting the cards, and then using the stats of those foxes to determine the dice that you get to roll, with each of the dice representing different traits in a fox that can be passed on to its offspring, except for the green ones, which do act as a wild, but you're essentially going to be pairing your dice together to try and complete different icons, with the green being able to pair with anything, and you do also get these tokens that give you even more flexibility, but essentially you're going to be rolling these dice, trying to complete different objective cards by getting a certain amount of traits in a single row. Then you're going to be applying those traits to a brand new fox card by using dry erase markers, and then those foxes are going to be going into the drafting pool for the next round, where players will be able to draft the foxes that you created as well as your opponents. Of course, along the way you're going to be able to upgrade your own personal player board and gain special cards and abilities that will make all of this just a little bit easier for you. Then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out, it is on Gamefound right now. And I am a little surprised that this one hasn't funded already, given the popularity of this game and the popularity of the game that this is often compared to, which is Wingspan. These games aren't anything like each other, they just share a designer. As always, I do like to give a quick shout out to Alex over at Boardgame Co, because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming games so that I can put together these videos for you each and every week. But then Alex also posts a video at the start of each month letting you know of the heavy hitters for that month. So if you are interested to see what is coming in the next month, you can expect that video to go up very, very soon in the next couple weeks here. And then of course, I do like to also mention Zilla Blitz, because I focus more on the general board games, but Zilla Blitz likes to focus more on the sub-niche of the historical war games, which I don't really dive too deeply into. So if you are interested in those style of games, you definitely want to check him out, and he will be also putting up a monthly video as well as weekly videos covering that genre and the games that are going to be launching for that month. That's pretty much everything I got for an intro, and we do got a few games to cover, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on March 23rd, which is actually today if you're watching this as soon as this video went up. And if you haven't, subscribe down below, hit that bell icon to get notified as soon as these get uploaded. And this is the Seventh Seas, and this plays 1 to 5 players. It takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a competitive worker placement game where players are each going to have their own ship out on the board, and then players are going to have 2 workers to perform their actions. Players are going to be taking turns placing 1 worker at a time, and there's 4 main actions in the game, but you're actually going to be taking 2 at a time, because every time you place your worker, you're going to be able to perform the 2 actions beside your worker in any order that you choose. And I'll just go through what each of those actually do, but the main one is to actually move your ship, and you'll be able to move your ship equal to the amount of movement points that you have for your ship, which you can upgrade by getting more sails onto your own personal player board. You can continue to move up to that many movement points or choose to stop whenever you like, but anytime that you move through a tile that doesn't already have a card revealed beside it, then you're going to be revealing one of those cards, and each of the tiles will have their own deck of cards associated with it. You can also spend your movement points in order to redraw a card if you don't like the one that you got. But if you happen to draw an encounter card, or if you end up moving to a tile that has an encounter card, then you have to stop immediately and you have to resolve that encounter. And I'll come back to how the encounters work, but first let's explain the other 3 actions, because if you stop your movement at a port card, then you can use the port action that allows you to exchange resources for other resources. But if you stopped at a tile with an island card, then you can use the action to explore the island, which will allow you to roll dice in order to try and get the number of stars depicted on that card in order to gain the associated resources. And you always do get 1 die for free, but you'll be able to spend your red cubes in order to add additional dice to your rolls, increasing your chance of success. Final action allows you to either upgrade or repair your ship, but you can only choose to do one of those each time that you perform this action, and you can upgrade your ship by purchasing more sails to increase its movement, or by adding more cannons to increase its firepower. In order to heal your ship, you're going to be repairing any of the planks that you might have lost. And the nice thing about all of this is that the better condition and more upgraded your ship is at the end of the game will be earning you victory points. You can also gain victory points by successfully completing a card at each of the different locations, but you can only do this once per location. You're going to be indicating this on your player board by adding the token to the associated location in the top left corner of your player board. You do also get to keep any of the cards that you completed, and you're going to be storing them on the right hand side of your board here. And for each type that you're able to get 4 or more of, that's going to be gaining you 2 victory points at the end of the game. This means that not only do you want to complete a card at each of the individual locations, but you also want to have an even distribution of the types of cards that you're completing in order to maximize the victory point potential. But like I said, anytime that you're on a tile that has an encounter card revealed beside it, you're going to have to resolve that encounter, and each of these cards is going to have an amount of health indicated in the bottom left corner of the card. And then there's going to be a number of stats in either cannonballs or swords, and there can also be these question mark squares, which mean that you're going to have to roll a die to determine what stat that's going to be. And if you don't want to fight the encounter, you can always avoid it by spending a certain amount of resources, but if you're not able to do that, or if you simply don't want to, then you're going to be resolving the encounter by using dice rolling and rolling a combat die for each of the cannons that you have on your own personal ship. These dice will also be gaining you a number of cannonballs or swords, but you're going to be resolving the cannonballs first. And the way that this works is that you're going to be inflicting the number of cannonballs worth of damage against the card, and it's also going to be inflicting damage on you equal to the amount of cannonballs it has. But if you're able to inflict enough damage to completely wipe out its health, then you have defeated that card and you get to claim it and gain the benefits. But if neither you or the opponent were defeated, then you're going to be continuing to resolve the battle by comparing the number of swords. And it's simply the ship that has the most swords that wins at this point, with ties favoring the opponent's ship. And if you lose here, not only did you take that hit in your health, but you also do have to give up a portion of your resources. But if you're able to defeat the ship, then you will get the resources depicted on that card. But the game continues like this over a series of rounds, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked down below. And launching on March 24th, we have Tokyo Capsule Hotel, which plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a really interesting competitive economic game because it does have a few unique mechanisms in it that I haven't seen in any other games. But in this game, players are investors buying up land, building hotels and attractions, but then you can also subdivide that land and basically sell any asset that you own. But one of those unique mechanisms is the way that the end of this game is actually triggered, because at the start of the game, players are going to be choosing a loan amount that they want to start the game off with. And then the end of the game is triggered as soon as any player is able to completely pay off their loan as well as its accrued interest at the start of a round. If there's any other player that was able to do that on the same round, then you're going to be comparing whoever has the most money left over, and then that would be the winner of the game. But how do you actually buy land and actually make money in this game? And this is another really interesting and unique aspect of this game, because players will actually be buying land according to these different land tiles here that all have a different associated price with them. And whenever you buy land, you're actually going to be taking that board, putting it on the sheet of paper here, and then tracing it around it to indicate that land belongs to you. All the players will be sharing the single sheet, which makes the amount of space on it very, very limited. But what's cool about this is that anything that you own, you can actually just draw a line straight through it in order to subdivide the land however you see fit. This can be really nice if you want to create multiple different districts where you can score individually, or if you want to sell off a piece of land to one of your opponents, because bartering is a big aspect of this game. But the way that the rounds actually work is that at the start of each round, you're going to be checking if any of the players are able to pay off their loans, and if not, you're going to be moving into the buying phase, and players are going to be taking turns either purchasing something from the game itself or bartering with the other players. There's a variety of different types of hotels and attractions that you can purchase, and they all score in different ways and also score differently depending on what else you have in a district. but players will be able to buy those and then put them into any of the areas that they own in order to create their individual districts that they'll be scoring and gaining income for at the end of the round. But the other cool thing about purchasing anything from the game is that it's going to be pushing this tracker up equal to the amount of money that was spent. And once this token moves over one of the lines, depending on whichever round it is, that's going to be triggering the end of that round. So the amount of money that players spend is actually the determining factor for when a round ends. If all the players have had a turn and that marker hasn't passed the threshold yet, then the round just continues until it does. But the game continues like this, with players earning income every round and then spending that income on more land and assets, and then placing those assets following the placement rules. There are some special assets that do grant some special abilities, and some of these assets can be one of a kind, so you do kind of have to race for them. But the first player who is able to pay off their loan is going to be triggering the end of the game. Then the player with the most money left over at the end of the game wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, definitely check it out. I'll have it linked in the description down below. Also launching on the 25th, we have Wormwood, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a card battler, but what makes this one really interesting is that you actually have to forge your cards before you're able to use them. And the cards that you have access to are determined by the faction that you choose to play as at the start of the game, but essentially there's going to be a couple different types of cards. There's going to be the echo cards, which act as victory points, and the first player to get 10 of those forged in front of them first wins the game. But then there are also the faction cards, which can have a variety of effects, but you're mostly going to be using them to attack your opponent and defend yourself in various ways. Players are going to be taking turns performing their actions, but at the start of your turn, you're always going to be drawing 2 special tokens into your pool, and these tokens just go on to your center faction board. But you can use these tokens in order to forge cards from your hand, because for each of the tokens that you have, you'll be able to put one of your cards face down to the right of you, and then assign it one of those tokens to indicate that it has begun to be forged. Each of these cards is going to have a number of turns that are required before it is fully forged, but once a card is forged, you'll be able to put it out in front of you. If it's an echo card, then you just get to put it out in front of you, showing that you have earned that victory point. But if it's a faction card, you can assign it either to the right of you to defend against your forges, or you can assign it to the left of you to defend against your hand. And the reason that that's important is because whenever a player uses any of their available cards in order to attack their opponent, they get to choose whether they want to attack their forge or attack their hand. And if the other player is not able to defend against it, then the active player gets to discard a card from either the forge or their hand, depending on what they attacked. But if that card is an echo card, then instead of discarding it, they actually get to keep it for themselves. But the rounds continue like this, with players gaining these forge tokens, then using them to forge cards from their hand, but any cards that you already do have out from a previous turn are going to have their tokens move around the circle clockwise, and once they've moved the appropriate amount for that card, you'll be able to get that card into your possession. But there is one more thing I want to point out here, because instead of using one of these tokens to forge a new card, you can instead flip it to the other side in order to push one of your existing forged tokens forward 1 space. This is a really excellent way to try and forge one of your cards a lot faster if you are particularly interested in getting that card forged. Not only this, but once you flipped over those tokens, they then become a different type of token, which can be used in order to trigger different actions with certain faction cards that you might have out in play. This creates a really interesting dynamic on how you want to use those tokens, but once you do have your cards out in play, those all become new actions that you can perform on a subsequent turn in order to get different benefits from those cards, or even to attack your opponent. But like I said, the first player who's able to get 10 of those echo cards forged in front of them first wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description below. And launching on the 26th, we have Dice Treasure, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play. And this one is a campaign that launched a few months ago, but they ended up pulling this one down and they're relaunching it now. And I really do hope to see this one fun, because it does look like a really well-designed game. It looks like a lot of fun, especially if you're a fan of the game Sagrada. This one definitely takes some inspiration from that, but I think it is doing its own thing here. But because this one did launch a few months ago, I did already offer footage for this one, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you. But if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And this is another game that I think looks like a ton of fun, offering a lot of very puzzly decisions to the players. And this one is a competitive game, but the way that it works is that each player is going to be dealt a hand of pattern cards at the start of the game, and then players are going to be taking turns drawing a pool of dice from a bag and then rolling those dice, and you're going to be trying to place as many of those dice on your various cards in order to fulfill those patterns. Each of the cards will have different spaces that might have requirements as to the value or the color of the die that can be placed on it, and players will be able to place as many dice as they can, and they can also reserve 2 dice for the future. But there is also the additional requirement that no 2 dice can be placed side by side if they share the same color or if they share the same value. So this is another requirement that you're going to be trying to fulfill as you fill out your various locations on your pattern cards. Any remaining dice that you weren't able to use or reserve for a future turn are going to be going to the center of the table, allowing for other players to also choose from those dice when it becomes their turn and they are placing dice on their cards. This already sounds like a lot of fun to me, but there's another really cool mechanism in this game because every time you have another turn in this game, you're actually going to be drawing 1 less die from the bag, making your options smaller and smaller as the game goes on. And once players get down to only drawing 2 dice from the bag, they're actually going to be putting all their incomplete cards into the center of the table, creating an open market where any player can try to complete any of those cards. Players are going to be gaining victory points for each of the cards that they're able to complete, equal to the amount of coins that are depicted on that card. Each card also has an icon on it, and whichever player finishes a card with that icon first is going to be gaining a token that is going to be worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. The round ends once players can draw no more dice from the bag, and then you're going to be wiping any incomplete cards from the table along with any dice, putting them back in the bag, and then starting the round over again until one player reaches the amount of points to win the game, and then that player wins. And if you are interested in this one, you can find a link to it in the description below. Also on the 26th, we have Heroes of Sanctum, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play, and this one does look like a really solid cooperative game, but one thing to note about this one is that even if you are playing with less than 4 players, you still will be using 4 heroes out on the board. But I don't think it's a huge issue for this one because of the nature of the game. This one is more of a strategy game, but each of the heroes are unique and they'll have their own set of stats and abilities. And also each of the hero cards are double-sided, and there are ways to upgrade your heroes throughout the game. And anytime that you're able to do that, you're going to be flipping them to their upgraded side. And this is a game that offers quite a lot of variability because not only are you going to be able to choose 4 different characters from the larger pool of characters that are available, but you're also going to be choosing a quest that you want to try and complete for each of your games. And there are a whole deck of quest cards that you'll get to choose from, with each of them having variable difficulty, length, their own set of lore, along with their own special rules and different effects that could trigger at different points in the quest. But they'll also outline any special setup or modifications that you'll have to do in order to play that quest. But before I get into the round structure and how the game actually plays, I first just want to explain to you what you're seeing with all these cards out on the table here. And it's not too complicated, even though I know there is a lot going on in this picture. But essentially, each of these quests is going to be sending you to 1 or more regions, and you're always going to be resolving these one at a time, but you're going to be drawing that region card, and then it's going to provide some details as to how you set up the main play area. Each of the regions can have their own set of special effects that will apply as long as you're in that region, but they could be conditional as well. And it also has these numbers in the bottom left corner here, which dictate which type of proximity cards you're going to be putting out for this region. And the proximity cards are the 4 cards on the outermost corners here. What's really interesting is the way that your heroes are put out into play, because you have your 4 heroes in the center of the play area here with these Sanctum cards located between them. And what's really interesting about that is that that Sanctum card is actually going to be pairing those 2 heroes together that are adjacent to it, combining their health together and then applying the total health to the Sanctum card, because in this game your heroes don't actually take damage. Instead, the damage goes to the Sanctum card, and if that Sanctum card is completely depleted of its health, then both your heroes get knocked out together. There are some actions that do allow you to swap your heroes amongst each other, and anytime that you do that, it will be changing that total amount of health that your Sanctum card has, since it is the sum of the 2 heroes beside it. And that might be something you take advantage of in order to send your more strong heroes to the Sanctum card that isn't doing so well. Card located directly above the Sanctum cards is just your quest card, so that's going to be outlining the requirements of that quest and what you're trying to achieve and any special effects. But then the cards on the outermost left-hand side and the outermost right-hand side of the play area here are your threat cards, and they're going to be attacking the hero that is directly beside that card. And depending on the quest and the region, more of these could be spawning every round, and there usually is a starting amount of threats that will be revealed as soon as you set up that region. These proximity cards that I mentioned before will all have some sort of special effect that could be positive or negative or situational even, but essentially that's going to be affecting whichever one of your hero cards is closest to it, so you might even want to swap hero cards amongst each other just to put one of your heroes next to one of the proximity cards that are either a little bit more beneficial for it, or maybe even lessens the negative consequences that you might get from it. But another really cool aspect of this game is the way that the actions work, because each of your heroes are going to be able to perform one action in the hero phase, and your actions that are going to be available to you are going to be determined by this action board in the bottom left corner of this image here. And there's going to be a grid of different actions, with the red ones costing you 2 action points, and then the blue ones costing you 1 action point. But the amount of action points that you're able to spend for that round is determined in the top right corner of that card. So in this case, all of your heroes could take red actions since there are 8 action points to spend, but if all of them took the blue actions, you don't get to use those 4 extra action points. They are just lost to the game, and this all resets on the following round. But the actions can allow your heroes to do things like attack, heal, defend, or scout. And scouting is really important because it's going to be moving this green token out on this track, which is referred to as the scout track. But each of your regions is going to have a certain number associated with it that indicates the amount that you need to scout that region in order for you to be able to leave that region for another region. You're not required to do this, but it does give you the option, and depending on the quest that you're trying to complete, you might have already achieved what you're doing at this region and you'll want to move on to that next one. But some of the other actions might allow you to use your proximity cards or even use some of the equipment or items that you might have attained throughout the game. And there's also an action that allows you to taunt enemies to pull enemy cards into your battle line. And there are also actions that allow players to trade or assist the other heroes, or even swap positions with another hero card. Whenever a hero performs an action, they're going to be covering that action with their hero token, indicating that no other hero can take it for that round. But after all 4 of the heroes have performed their actions, it's going to be moving on to the threat phase. And all you're doing here is resolving any of the attack damage that the threats might have inflicted on your heroes. And of course, you're going to be subtracting any defense that your heroes might have at that time. But then after you've resolved all of that, you're then going to be resolving each of their special abilities, if any of the enemies have any. Finally, you move into the region phase. Just follow any instructions on the region card in order to set up the next round. And then you're going to be discarding the action card that you had in the previous round and putting a new one into play. The game continues like this until either the heroes have completed the objectives of that quest or until the heroes are defeated. But if you are interested to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description below. Also launching on the 26th, we have A.I.POKALYPSE. This plays 1 to 8 players and takes about 20 to 50 minutes to play. And this is another really solid card battler that has a lot of unique elements to it. And I guess I'll just start this one out by saying that this one is my own personal pick of the week because I do have a lot of confidence in this one. But what's really interesting about the way that this game actually works is that players are going to be building up to 6 different lanes that they can issue out different units. But unlike a lot of other card battlers, the strength of your unit that you put into a given lane is not determined by the cards or anything like that. Instead, each of your units always does start out with just 1 strength, and then you're going to be using different actions and effects in order to increase each of your unit's strength as the game goes on. And also, unlike a lot of other card battlers, these lanes don't actually fight against your opponent's opposing lane. Instead, you're going to be drawing more cards from the character deck, and depending on the color of that card, you're going to be matching it with the first card that also matches that color in your lanes from left to right. And your opponents are going to be doing the exact same thing here because everything in this game is simultaneous play. but essentially you're going to be adding the value of those two cards together, assuming you did have a color to match it with, and then you're going to be comparing that to your opponents, adding any modifiers, and then whichever player has the highest amount of strength is going to be the one winning that specific battle. That doesn't mean you win the round, but you did win the battle. If you draw a card and it doesn't match any of the colors that you currently have in play, then that card is just going to be battling on its own with the strength value outlined on it in the top left corner. And the reason that I'm so confident with this one being my own personal pick of the week is because I was sent a prototype of this game and I did get to play it a few times now, and I think it is a ton of fun, and I think they did a really great job here, and there is a lot of variety offered in this game and a lot of different things that you can do to try and tip the scales in your favor. But since I do have the game set up here, I'll just walk you through what a round kind of looks like, because at the start of each round you're always going to be drawing a hand of 6 cards from the character deck. And there are a bunch of different colors and characters that you can get. They're going to have a bunch of different icons on them that indicate different effects, either when you put them into play or when you discard them, or maybe at the start of a round, or even at certain points in combat. But the round does start in a recruitment phase where you're going to be drawing up to your hand limit of 6 cards, and then deciding which cards you want to play or discard in order to trigger their associated effects, if they have any triggered by those actions. But in order to play a card, you first have to have a lane to play it into, and you have a maximum of 6 lanes that each player can have in front of them at any given time. But in order to create a lane, you actually have to sacrifice one of the cards in your hand in order to create it, because you actually start with no lanes at the beginning of the game, and these cards are double-sided, and the backside of the card acts as the lane, but it also indicates the amount of strength that a card has when you assign it to that lane. And like I said, every time you assign a card out to a lane, it always starts with 1 strength. Then you'll also get to activate any of their effects that get triggered when you put them into play. And this specific card doesn't have any of those effects, but if I were to make another lane and then put this card out instead, this one has a play effect that allows me to boost the strength of my other human cards equal to the amount of other humans I control. And since these are both humans, I control one other human, which allows me to increase this human by 1 strength. And I love the amount of strategy here, because it really does matter the order that you play your cards, and it also does matter the order that you have your heroes out in front of you, because the ones on the left are more likely to get activated when you do go into battle. But just to show you an example of how order matters during the recruitment phase, I actually shouldn't have played this card so soon, because I do have another human card, and I can create another lane with this card, put this human out, which has no ability, just the same as the one before it. But when I put this drill sergeant out, he's now going to give me 2 strength to a human of my choice. So I can go ahead and increase this one to 3. And I chose to increase the strength of the leftmost one because it is the one that is most likely to engage in battle during the battle phase. And I'll just go ahead and show you how the battle phase works. And I just went ahead and set up a random opponent play area here, and I intentionally put them with just 2 lanes because it is very possible that players have a different amount of lanes than each other. But during the battle phase, you actually draw the number of cards for each player equal to the player that has the most lanes. So since I have the most lanes, which is 3, each player will draw 3 cards in front of them. So I'll give 3 cards to my opponent and 3 cards to myself. And what happens next is that we're both just going to be revealing the topmost card and then matching that card with the first card left to right that matches the same color as that card. So for myself, I would pair it with this first Swiss Army woman, and you ignore any of the abilities on the card you just drew. All you care about is its strength value, and for this one, it is a strength of 1. And since my Swiss Army woman has a strength of 3, you just add those together, and that means that my hero has a strength of 4. For my opponent, unfortunately for them, they drew a blue card and they don't have any matching blue card to pair it up with, so it's just going to be fighting out on its own, and it's going to have its base strength of 3, and since my strength is higher than theirs, then I win this battle just based on the strength here. But like I said, there are a lot of different cards that can modify your strength, and you can also use these ammo cards in order to increase a card's strength by 2. But I'll just indicate that I won this battle by putting this card on top of it, and this character can no longer be used for any of the following battles. And since my opponent lost this one, I'll just flip it down to indicate that they did not gain a battle point. Next, we just resolved the next card, and I drew this green card, which I'm not able to pair with any of my other cards, so it's just going to fight alone. And then lucky for them, they gained this red card, so they're going to add the value of that, which is 2, to the strength of this one, which is 5. So they have defeated my green card, so we're going to do the exact same thing here. And I'll just move this card down here covering the strength to indicate that that lane has been spent. And now it's down to the last battle cards, so let's go ahead and flip those. And for myself, I got this blue card, which would then pair with the leftmost card that has not been spent yet, which would be this one. So I added strength, which is 1, with the card in that lane, which is also 1. And since my opponent already used their red card, they don't have another card that they can pair this one with, so it's going to be fighting on its own, which means that we have tied in strength, and we both would not gain a battle point here. But you might ask yourself, why is it that my opponent player decided to only put down 2 lanes when they could have put down 3 lanes just like myself, because we both did have 6 cards? Well, the reason for that is because any cards that you have left in your hand during the battle phase, you can actually swap out with any of the cards that you drew if you happen to not like that card. So in this case, that's exactly what my opponent's going to do. Instead of using this red card, they're going to swap it out with the green card from their hand, because now that green card is going to get matched up with this other green card that they still have left here, and they're going to be adding the value of 3 to the value of 1, giving them a strength of 4, which now destroys my strength amount, winning them that point. Now that all the cards have been played, we can determine the winner of this battle phase, which is my opponent, because they won 2 of the battles, and I only won 1. So what you do here is you compare the difference, which is a value of 1, and then the loser would lose that amount of hit points, and your health is measured by this deck of red cards here, and I'll just go ahead and flip one over to indicate that I have lost 1 health. And now you might have noticed that these red cards are double-sided and that they do also have a track on them, because these can also act as a lane, and there's certain actions that allow you to swap them out. And whenever a hero moves up to any point in the strength track that indicates a certain icon, this red card will also gain you the benefit of that icon once that card reaches that amount of strength. And just like the back side of the card has the upgraded lane on it, the front side of the card has a upgraded hero, which is known as an elite unit. And there are different actions that allow you to get those into your hand, but the main way to do that is by getting 3 cards of the same value and the same color, and then trading those in for one of your elite units. So if we went to start the next round, and I draw my hand of 6 cards, if I happen to get another human that is also a 3, I now have a trio of units of the same color and the same number, which I can then trade in to gain this elite unit. Of course, there are a whole deck of these cards, which means that when you are adding either one of these cards as a lane or gaining one as an elite unit, it doesn't always come from your health deck, although oftentimes it does, which does make for a very interesting decision point. Like I said before, you can use these cards to temporarily boost your strength in a battle, but these ones are also double-sided as well. And on the back side of this card, you're going to have a faction that grants you with a special ability and sometimes some starting resources. And once you're comfortable with the game, you can start incorporating these into your battles as well to add a little bit more variety on top of the massive amount of variety this game already has to offer. For the record, I've only played this one as a 2-player head-to-head game, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to playing this one some more. And if this one does sound interesting to you, I will have it linked in the description below. And I should also mention that I do have a prototype here, so the final production copy may not look exactly like I've shown you here today. And also launching on March 26th, we have a very special campaign, but this one is not exactly for a board game. Instead, this one is for a comic book series written by one of the best board game content creators here on YouTube, which is Mark Maya, along with his wife, Brittany. And if you haven't checked out their channel yet, I will have it linked in the description below, and you should definitely give them a view because they do fantastic content and they do all sorts of reviews and playthroughs, and they put a lot of effort into these videos. I've actually met and played several games with them before, and they're fantastic to hang out with, just as hilarious in person as they are in these videos. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and check them out and subscribe if you do like their content. But if you have already watched their content, then you probably already are subscribed to their videos and you do already understand their humor. Although understanding Mark Maya's humor is a bit of a strong statement.
I heard that.
But as you might expect, that humor does transfer over to the comic book series, which does take place in a world where zombies, vampires, werewolves, and killer blood bunnies all have to coexist together, and it's pretty common to bump into them in the day-to-day. The main character is an underachiever who's been mixed up with the wrong crowds, and now on top of that, he's been unwillingly transformed into a vampire. This follows that story as he deals with the new adjustment, along with all the other issues he already has in his life. And this campaign's going to be offering you the first 2 chapters, which you can get a hard copy of, but there will be a digital version of the first chapter online absolutely for free if you want to check it out. And I did intend to just read the first few slides of the comic just to get an idea of how it's written and how it feels, but I did end up reading the entire first chapter, so definitely pulls you in, and I'm interested to see where it goes from here. This campaign's a great opportunity to get your hands on a solid series here, especially if you are a fan of comic books, but this is also a great opportunity just to show your support to one of the few board game channels that has been putting out fantastic content over several years already, and they continue to do so even with their busy lives and creating this comic book here for us today. So definitely check this one out. It's absolutely free to go ahead and check out that first chapter to see if this is a series that you might be interested in. But I know Mark Maya will really appreciate any support he can get in making this vision of his come to life. He is a huge fan of comic books, maybe even as much as he is with board games, but I know he's going to put a lot of effort and passion into these. And if he does even half a good job as he does with his videos, I know these are going to be fantastic. And as always, I will have a link to the campaign in the description below, but I will also have a link to their channel as well if you want to support them that way. Definitely check them out and subscribe if you do like their content. Also launching on the 26th, we have Diabolical Dave's Rumble Throwdown, and this plays 3 to 6 players and takes just 60 to 180 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive wrestling game where players are both going to have to earn the world title and then defend it at least once in order to win the game. But the way that this game works is that players are going to be going through a bunch of main events, and you can actually gain a few titles along the way that can gain you some special benefits. And you can also earn a manager along the way as well, which can grant you with some special abilities that might open up some new avenues that might be a little out of reach for your wrestler. But at the start of the game, players are going to be dealt a set of cards that you're going to be using to build up your wrestlers. Each player is going to have their own wrestler sheet, and you'll be able to choose which side you want to flip it to, with the only difference being whether you want it to be a heel or a face wrestler, which pretty much means whether or not you are a fan of the crowd or not, and that's going to be determining some different effects within the game and determining which cards you can or can't use. But other than that, each wrestler is going to have a style card as well as a gimmick card, and this is going to determine which types of moves you are proficient in, and the gimmick card is going to be granting you with some special abilities. Players will also receive some basic move cards as well as a finishing move, and some of these move cards can actually be different items or gear as well, which you can equip to the various slots in your wrestler. Something that's interesting about the moves is that they do have varying strength depending on if your wrestler is proficient with those moves or weak with those moves, and that's going to be determined by your wrestler style card that I mentioned before. Whenever you do engage in battle with another wrestler, you're just looking at the overall strength to determine which wrestler is going to win that match, but of course there are various modifiers and different things you can do to modify your strength temporarily, and also certain styles of wrestlers can give them advantages over others. But players are going to be spending their action points in order to put their different move and item cards into play, and then of course you can also use those action points to activate any special effects during an actual match. For players to level up the wrestler, they're going to be fighting against a wrestler deck, and as you gain more strength with your wrestler, it's going to be moving you through different ranks. Whenever you go up against one of these generic wrestlers, you're going to be checking its current strength based on your current rank, and then you're going to be comparing your strength to its strength. Like I said, some wrestlers have advantages over others, and these wrestlers could have different special effects as well, but you're going to want to try and deploy the appropriate cards and use the appropriate abilities in order to try and get your strength above theirs. If you're able to win the match, then you're going to be gaining a match win token, which you'll just be able to keep to increase your strength by 1 permanently, and you'll also be able to draw a few cards from the move deck and then choose one to add to your hand. Of course, you're going to want to choose some moves that do work well with your style and also work well with the other cards that you might already have in your possession. Of course, players can also fight each other as well, and like I said, the whole goal here is to earn that championship belt and then defend it at least once, and the first player that's able to do that wins the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also launching on the 26th, we have Super Trains, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 45 minutes to play. And this is an excellent game if you're looking for somebody to play with the kids, because in this game, each player is going to be controlling their own super train as they fight back against the evil transport truck. The transport truck's going to be moving around the board and causing different emergencies that the players are going to have to resolve. And in order to resolve those emergencies, players are going to be spending different types of gears from their train board. Players will have to upgrade their trains in order to hold more of these, and I'll explain how that works in just a second here. But in addition to resolving those emergencies, players can also deliver different passengers or goods to certain locations for other benefits. But the way that all of this works is that players are going to be taking turns performing actions on their turn, but at the start of every player's turn, they're going to be rolling these 3 dice. One of the dice is going to indicate whether the transport truck is going to be moving or causing an emergency. If it's causing an emergency, then you're going to be looking at the second die, which is going to be indicating which location that emergency is going to spawn at. Players are going to be starting the game with a certain amount of emergencies of each color type, with the amount being dictated by the player count, and with different colors being more difficult than the others. The end of the game is triggered once all those emergencies have been resolved, but in order to resolve an emergency, you do have to drive your train towards that location, and then also provide the emergency tile with the appropriate gears needed to resolve it. And this is where that third die comes into play here, because this die is going to dictate which colored gear your trains are going to generate. As I said, players are each going to have their own personal train player board, and as you complete different emergencies and objectives, you'll be able to add more gear generators to that train. Whenever that gear die is rolled at the start of a player's turn, all players are going to be generating a gear of that color. But the active player does get a couple benefits, because if you are the active player who rolled that die, and let's say you happen to roll a yellow, then all the players will be able to generate 1 yellow gear on a space that they have a yellow gear tile. But for the active player, they can actually generate up to 3 gears if they have yellow tiles that are connected to each other. Not only that, but if you're the active player and you roll the wild gear color, then you can choose what color that is, and all the players do have to pick up that color, and there are a couple of other benefits that you do get as the active player. After those gears have been generated, the active player can then move their train up to 5 spaces, but you have to move in the same direction for the entirety of your movement, and you can stop to complete different objectives along the way and then continue your movement, but like I said, it always does have to continue in the same direction. You'll want to keep in mind where the transport truck is, because you can't access any locations that the transport truck is currently occupying, or if the transport truck is covering a portion of the tracks, then you're not going to be able to move through that section of the track until the transport truck moves. But the game continues like this, with players taking turns rolling those dice, moving the transport truck or activating different emergencies, and then using their trains to resolve those emergencies and deliver different goods and passengers in order to get other benefits. And one other thing with resolving the emergencies is that if you don't quite have enough gears in order to do it, you can request that the other players help you, and any of the players that contribute their own gears towards resolving that emergency will then gain some kind train cards, which will give them some special abilities and effects that they'll be able to use later in the game, so it is in their interest to help the other players. But this is a competitive game, so the player with the most victory points at the end of the game is the winner, and if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description below. Also launch on the 26th, we have the Arena of Baradum, which plays 2 to 6 players and takes just 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive arena combat game where each player is going to be playing as their own unique character with their own set of stats as well as a special ability. Players are going to have stats for their attack, defense, health, and movement. And on your turn, you're going to be able to take 2 out of 4 possible actions. The first action is just to move up to the number of movement points of your character, but you can also perform a basic attack to attack anyone who's adjacent to you. Then there's also an action to either draw a card into your hand or play a card from your hand. And these cards are very important because they're going to allow you to do some special attacks that you're not able to do through your basic actions, and they'll also grant you with some other one-time use abilities that you'll be able to use out of your turn or even during battle to increase the amount of strength or defense that you might have. There's a bunch of different cards offered in the game, and the specific cards that you'll have access to are going to depend on the character that you're playing as, because each character actually has their very own card deck associated with them. Whenever players do attack each other, you're going to be comparing the attack power of the attacker against the defense power of the defender. Each player is also going to be able to roll a die to add the value that they roll onto their stats. And of course, if you have any cards that allow you to re-roll the die or modify the outcome of your strength or defense, you'll be able to play those as well. And then if the attacker's attack power is greater than their opponent's defense, then the defender is going to be losing some life points, and then the attacker is going to be gaining a victory point. And this is one of the two primary ways to gain victory points in this game, because the other way is by collecting these orbs. And you simply collect them by moving through them with a movement point. But these orbs are not always the same thing, because every time one is collected, you're going to be replacing it with a different one somewhere random out on the board. Aside from granting you victory points, these orbs can also have other positive or negative effects, so it is a bit of a risk. But the game continues like this until a player reaches a certain amount of victory points, and then that player wins the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. And launching on the 27th, we have Magical Cards, and this plays 2 players. It takes just 5 to 30 minutes to play. And this one is a head-to-head card battler where each player is going to have their own deck of cards, with each of the cards having different types of elements on them that you'll be able to combine together in different ways in order to help yourself or harm your opponents. But something to note about this one is that in order to deal damage to your opponent, you're actually going to be using an app to track the player's health and also scan the cards and then issue the effects of your combos. And the publishers were nice enough to send me a prototype of this one, and I gotta say, these cards are some of the nicest cards I've ever seen. These are really thick cardstock, and they are quite a nice size. I don't know if the final version will be the exact same as these cards, but I imagine they will be about this size because you do need to scan them on your phone. And I think the added size makes it scan just a little bit easier. But something that I really do like about this game is that all you need is these 2 decks of cards in your phone in order to play it. So you can pretty much take this anywhere you want to go, and you'll be able to play this with almost anyone because the rules for this one are also very simple, and everything you need to know is pretty much outlined on the cards. The way that the game plays is that each player is going to be assigned to one of the decks. So if this was my deck, I would always be drawing 4 cards at the start of my turn, and then I'd be able to play these cards in order to issue attacks on my opponent. And one thing I should mention that is a little unfortunate with the prototype is that it only works with iPhone at the time of me filming this, and unfortunately for me, I am an Android user, so I can't actually show you the app on my phone, but they do have a great video on the campaign page website if you do want to see what that looks like. But like I said, there are a bunch of different types of element cards you can draw, and they all have varying effects. For example, this water card is really interesting because it actually causes the player to be wet for 5 turns. And I do have this lightning card that adds additional damage if the opponent is wet. So although I can't combine these 2 cards in order to modify their effects in a single turn, I can still play them one after another in order to chain them together for some different effects. Cards do also just have their own single effect just for using them. For example, this Earth card will damage the opponent for 1 health, but if I were to combine it with a Fire card, then combining them together will turn them into Lava, which will instead deal 5 damage. But you might have noticed at the top here that there is an effect with an arrow pointing away from you and an arrow pointing towards you, and those are the different effects that will happen to your opponent or to yourself. For example, if my opponent played water against me, I could play this Fire card to not only deal damage towards them, but to also remove the wet effect that their water would have had on me. The same goes for when you play a water card. If I was ignited by a Fire card in a previous turn, playing a water card would dispel that effect. As you're playing the game, you might also come across these one-time use special effect cards that can have all sorts of varying effects, but something to note is that there are these special gold cards, and whenever you play one of these, it's going to be adding an orb to your side of the screen on the phone. That orb will either go to the right or the left side of your phone, and then you can just put your card on the associated side to remember what exactly that spell does. And at any time during a future turn, you can just click that orb to activate this spell. So this gives you a mechanism that you can lock in a spell to then use on a future turn, which is a really fun dynamic. But the game continues like this until a player brings their opponent's health down to 0, and then that player wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description below. And of course, you can click to get notified. That's it for this week, but don't leave yet because we still got a few awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you gotta do is leave a comment down below. You don't have to like or subscribe or do anything like that. And the first giveaway is going to be for a pledge for River Valley Glassworks. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a competitive game where players are going to be set collecting different types of river glass, and there's going to be a main board out in the center of the table that's going to have a lake as well as a river feeding into it. The cool thing about how the river works is that players can actually place glass onto a river tile in order to take all of the glass on an adjacent tile, but then that empty tile is going to move all the way to the back of the river and push all the tiles forward. Then you'll be able to take all the glass that you just earned and place it out on your board. One thing to note about the way that the scoring works in this game is that you're only going to be scoring your 2 largest columns, and your columns score more points if they are located on the right side of your board, but you always have to start a column from left to right as you gain more glass, so you will have to be strategic with the glass that you collect in order to try and fill up the rows to the furthest on the right, but you do also get to score every single row that you have completed. So once you have started each of those columns, you're going to want to make sure that any one column is not trailing too far behind and losing you out on scoring potential of those rows. And I want to thank the publisher for this one because they actually donated an all-in pledge, which will get you everything on the campaign, including 132 real glass pieces to upgrade your glass components in the game. And this pledge also includes a completely other game, which does fit in thematically with River Valley Glassworks, but this one is called Lure. And I didn't have a chance to look into this one too much, but I absolutely do love the artwork that I'm seeing here. And I'm a big fan of the fishing theme. But all this could be yours. All you got to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag glass, and you can leave any comment that you like. But if you're looking for something in particular, I think we all have some sort of childhood memories, whether it's at the beach or fishing at a river or doing anything like that. If you do, maybe you could let us know about it. But I know when I was younger, me and my older brother just used to find all sorts of random junk at the beach and collect it. And we'd frequently get yelled at by our parents for just swimming way too far out, trying to get to that next sandbar. That's not it, because we have another giveaway, and this one is going to be for Acornism, and this one is a tile laying game where players are going to be placing these double-sided tiles where one side's going to have some sort of animal that has an acorn requirement, and then the other side is going to have some amount of acorns. But in order to score the victory points for that animal, you have to get the exact right amount of acorns around that animal, and you have to fill in all 4 sides. Players are going to be taking turns doing this, limiting the tile placement within an 8x8 grid, and then once no more tiles can be placed, the player with the most victory points wins the game. I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one because we haven't had a giveaway on the Discord at all this year, so I'm going to be running this giveaway over on the Discord. Don't worry, it's still super easy to enter. All you got to do is head to the Discord in the description below, head over to the giveaways channel and click that emoji underneath that giveaway. This will get drawn automatically at the end of the week, but while you're on the Discord, feel free to check out all the other channels that we have here because we do keep track of all the campaigns here. And I have everything grouped into when they're going to be launching. So if they're launching next week, or if there's any remaining this month, and further into the future. And we do also have a Safari Zone where you can go ahead and throw a Pokeball and try and catch a Pokemon. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways. But to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here, and the first pledge we're going to draw for is the giveaway for Inventors of the South Tigris. And under this giveaway, all you do was leave a comment with the hashtag Inventor. And all these names down here are bonus entries for my Ko-fi supporters, and if you want to support all my effort that I put into these videos, I do appreciate any support that you can give over on Ko-fi. For context, each one of these videos makes me about $20 from YouTube revenue, so all the support here really does make a massive difference for me and makes all this effort just a little bit more sustainable. It also gets you some bonus entries into these giveaways as a nice show of my appreciation. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the lucky winner of Inventors of the South Tigris is Mitch, which is one of our members over on Ko-fi. So congratulations, Mitch. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a sweet pledge here. And now let's go ahead and draw the pledge for Under Our Sun. So we'll do the exact same thing here. And draw the comments. And draw a winner. And the winner of this pledge is Arison, which is another one of our members here, so congratulations on the win. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Under Our Sun. And I do want to thank everyone for the support, whether it's on Ko-fi or just from watching these videos. It really does mean a lot, and just seeing viewership and seeing those comments really does motivate me to put these out every single week, so I really do appreciate it. Keep it up if you do enjoy the content, and hopefully there were a couple games that you might have found interesting. There's not a whole lot of heavy hitters this week, but it's funny how many games do slip under the radar. There's actually quite a lot I like this week. It's not always about getting the next big, expensive, complicated board game. Sometimes it's just nice to add some smaller games that are easy to table and easy to teach and easy to play with anyone that you have around. I think Dice Treasure, Heroes of Sanctum, and A.I.POKALYPSE are the three that I'm most interested in, which is kind of funny because neither of those three have particularly amazing artwork. And I know artwork does make a massive difference when people are deciding what they want to back. And it is important for me as well, but gameplay trumps everything else. And if I think a game looks good, I think it looks good no matter what it actually looks like, if that makes sense. But as always, I appreciate all of you being here. Thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.